Welcome back to our panel discussion, How Agencies Are Reducing IT Complexities in a Multi-Cloud World, sponsored by CenturyLink here on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network. My guests today are Alan Hill, Director of Telecommunications for the General Services Administration. Sanjay Gupta is Chief Technology Officer of the Small Business Administration. Stephen Grunch is Branch Chief Enterprise and Cloud Services at U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. And Zain Ahmed, Vice President and General Manager, Civilian Sales for CenturyLink. I'm your moderator, Tom Temin. And I want to talk a little bit about the governance, because that's really hard to separate from the ultimate management of all of this cloud and network infrastructure.
Yes.
And Stephen, you mentioned earlier on that you have a very well-defined governance for cloud. Who's involved and what does it govern?
Sure. So first of all, the governance of our cloud environment is a collaboration between multiple teams. The first team obviously is the infrastructure division, which I work for. But then we also have our developer groups, and we also have our infrastructure security or cybersecurity division that formulates policy about what can be done in the cloud, what kind of workloads can be moved into the cloud, and how that infrastructure is going to be organized inside of these different cloud environments. In addition to that, we also have active monitoring policies in place so that when a workload is running in the cloud and the cloud environments are stood up, that we have an active monitoring capability in place to ensure that the workloads are meeting our requirements and meeting the ideals of the policies that we put in place. So
the idea is you can't manage what you can't monitor.
Right. So we create a monitoring utility or put monitoring utilities in place to validate that our policies are effective, right? So this may include different services or different components within the cloud infrastructure itself, making sure that those are in compliance with our policies. Okay. In addition to that, part of our governance package is the cost model. So all of our cloud environments are integrated into a cost management tool that allows us to see what we're spending, what our inventory is, how much of different resources are being consumed, and also the monitoring tools and the cost management tools that we are using measure whether or not our tagging and labeling is correct on all of our assets. So we have policies in place that make tagging mandatory for all cloud assets that get stood up, right? And this helps us to identify, how much per application that we're spending, whether or not those particular assets are overspending or being over-provisioned.
So it sounds like the management and the governance are really interrelated practices there at a very fine-grained level. Is that the case also at SBA, Sanjay?
Yeah, that's correct. And I think it requires a change in the way you look at your policies and procedures. So I'll give you a case in point. Traditionally, change management used to happen once a week. The change management team would meet and they'll decide on a change and approve it. Now in the cloud environment, you're doing changes by the hour, by the minute. So this whole notion of the change management board meeting once a week is almost not existent anymore in the cloud environment. So yes, it does require a complete paradigm change in the way you're looking at it. The fact that you move from a CapEx model to an OpEx model, that in of itself is a change, which obviously you have to work with your financial officer's office to figure out how does that impact. The other part of this is, the implication is, since it is no longer defined that this is exactly what you'll consume, you do not have an exact idea. You have somewhat of an idea, but you do not know exactly what the dollar figure will be at the end of any given period of time, whether it's a month end or a quarter end or a year end. So with the acquisition cycle going, you cannot exactly project this will be exactly to that amount. So that's another chain that is driving some changes from an acquisition standpoint, from a management standpoint, and how you look at financial aspects of the cloud environment. There's many more I can go into, but in the interest of time, I'll kind of defer to Alan to give his perspectives as well.
Yeah, because you mentioned acquisition being a big part of the playbook and also of the cloud smart strategy, which it is. We talked about human capital, but that idea of the third element there, the acquisition, how does that play into all of this?
Very much so, because as the customers are trying to put in those solutions, they need to have a sound acquisition strategy in how they're going to deliver those services and keep the modernization going, so that when they put acquisition packages together, how to continually modernize their infrastructure as necessary, so that as the technology evolves, you're not out there going and constantly doing new acquisitions in order to meet the changing needs in the environment.
Also, I would imagine you have to plan for your acquisition to match the money you have for the cloud and modernization activities you're going to have going, because one is an ongoing cost.
Absolutely. And one of the things that we're doing at GSA is that we have pricing tools and pricing models that allow them to take what they have in budget and see what they can actually do, because we have under the EIS contract we have where you can actually see what all the vendors are offering and what their prices are, and it's visible for all the vendors, so you can kind of get an idea of what those costs are, whether it's whether you're doing the infrastructure yourself or whether you're trying to do managed services from a cloud service provisioning to a network provisioning to a security provisioning. And it allows you to plan much better.
Is it possible, yeah, so that was really, I think you answered my question, but is it possible to say this is what the workload looks like, this is the expected user activity over this period of time, to estimate, and these are the cloud providers we're thinking of using, to get at least a ballpark estimate of that's going to be $1 million versus $10 million?
Absolutely. The tools that we have in our hosting center allows them to be able to project those type of costs of what a current technology is and as you modernize it.
Because it's better to repurpose 6 figures than 7 or 8 figures.
Absolutely.
It goes over a lot better, yeah. And so, Zaid, my question for you then is, we've heard a lot of discussion about the interrelatedness of the cloud migration, the modernization. At the heart of all that, in some ways, is the infrastructure, which itself can be modernized along with applications. So how does that fit into the cloud modernization and management complex?
Yeah, absolutely. As you look at kind of building any house, you look at the foundation of the house. Your network is your foundation. And the foundation has to be very strong and be able to be agile enough in these days where the technology is transforming every month or so, right? Be able to adapt. And GSA has done a fantastic job in putting EIS together where the contract allows you to adapt as the technology changes. As you look at that and you think, what am I going to do? Because network is not static anymore. It's a verb. It's an action. It's always changing. So the yesterday's network of MPLS is not what's going to be that's going to be able to scale with you. So being able to have dynamic connections to the cloud, being able to having SD-WAN deployed, being able to manage that environment across the board to make sure you're getting the most out of it. And that's why I honestly believe CenturyLink is in the best position, because we own, operate, and manage one of the largest global networks across the board. So we've seen it happen. We've seen it happen ahead of time on the digital revolution that's happening on the commercial side. IT modernization is now taking its full toe in the government side. It's an exact replication of what we've seen across the board.
Yeah, Steve, how does that play in at USCIS? Because you mentioned earlier that some of almost every application is in the cloud, and there's still a lot of legacy. You probably have 3270 communications even still going in some places. I imagine that can maybe run virtualized over a modern network.
So we've modernized our network from the perspective of the cloud access. I mean, we're using direct connections to our cloud service providers.
And those are your connections, or their connections, or a third-party EIS type?
We do use a third-party connection from a data center, to the cloud service providers that we use back to our own network. That was a key decision that we made, to make those connections directly into the cloud service provider. It cut down a lot of traffic. We got substantially better performance this way. and we were able to secure the traffic coming in and out of the cloud environment. So that was a key part of our infrastructure strategy moving forward. Once that infrastructure was in place, we were able to build the applications and move the data, at a significantly faster pace than what we had been doing in the data center.
Yeah, Sanjay, I imagine that's a big issue because that relates the network and the infrastructure to the cost. I mean, the bigger the pipe, the faster things happen.
Right. So definitely the network is evolving much faster than it was evolving, say, 10 years ago. So one of the things we are looking at it is how do we continue to scale up our network capabilities while keeping our cost lower than what we have been doing. So we're doing a few things which probably I'll talk in a later segment, maybe another time, is how we are changing the entire model of the network. And somebody mentioned about MPLS network,
well,
which is sort of the comment.
Hint.
But it's a longer discussion perhaps, so maybe in your next segment perhaps. Anyhow, but we are basically revolutionizing how we will be using network connectivity in the cloud. We are simplifying it. We're going to reduce our cost structure on that, and we will probably reduce our dependencies through some of the network providers, which probably some of you may not like to hear, but those models are going to be more improving from a customer standpoint. I want to also kind of comment back on one of the things we were talking in your earlier round of questions about cost management, and I mentioned about being not able to project your cost. The one thing I should have mentioned also that I want to mention is the fact that most cloud service providers provide a concept called reserved instances. What you do is you reserve your instance, you do a pre-commit to what you'll use over a period of say 12 months or larger, and you are able to get significantly reduced costs for your cloud infrastructure using those reserved instances. So again, that's one way to be able to sort of give some definition around what your cost model is. Now, some workloads are suited for that. For example, if you're doing monitoring, you're going to run the monitoring process 7/24, 365, and that will not necessarily see a lot of changes in terms of the volume or the capacity. So those kind of workloads are suited for reserved instances. But things that kind of ebb and flow with time or period or seasons, those are probably not good workloads for that. Last, coming back to the network piece you mentioned about, I think the notion of the SD-WAN or software-defined wide area network, combined with what some of the product service offerings that are being made available through some of the cloud service providers, is quite a game changer the way we are seeing it, and we are in the early parts of doing some proof of concepts around it, and I think that's going to be a significant departure from the traditional concepts of networking. It's a combination of connectivity, performance, and cybersecurity. So I'll just leave it at that for now, and perhaps at a later time we'll be happy to share more details about it.
All right, so that's the third garage door we'll open in some other session. But Alan, the many offerings of GSA must be oriented to this multi-cloud, modernized network infrastructure environment that people have, as opposed to the last round of offerings.
Absolutely. Under the EIS contract, which is the bridge and the modernization of the network and security infrastructure, under there, the SD-WAN offering to be able to leverage that, because SD-WAN was built for the purpose of Sanjay's question on how do I expand and bandwidth. So using an infrastructure as a service model, it allows you to expand and contract as necessary to your business needs. SD-WAN provides that, and on the EIS contract, that's an offering that agencies can then go from these high-cost MPLS networks to much more cost-effective SD-WAN type solution.
Okay, Zane, we'll give you the final comments here on this whole idea of SD-WAN. I mean, software-defined wide area network, for those that may want to know what that acronym we've been using stands for. What is it, how does it work, and how does it enable modernization?
So SD-WAN basically is an intelligent network. It's software defined, so based on your workload or what you're sending across, it prioritizes, and based on that, sends whichever route it sees the best way to send it. But I also want to emphasize that SD-WAN is not the overall solution, right? What we were talking about, hybrid wide area network is where you want to be in the new age. Because SD-WAN gets you to the edges and the branch offices and gets you the complete kind of portfolio from there. But as you go to regional offices and have more security as well as requirement for bandwidth, there's the MPLS, the old MPLS comes into play. As you go towards your core of your data centers, that's where your optical wavelengths come in and connecting that at a high speed. And then as you move towards cloud service providers, there's direct connection into it. So it's a layered approach to solving a complex problem, and that's how you get to an agile network. It's not being static.
And given the fact that agencies have these layered eras of technology with the legacy applications and so forth, this can accommodate maybe some old protocols that may be virtualized, but nevertheless power some of those mainframe applications. Fair enough way to put it?
Correct. It definitely enables that because you have a good mix of new technology and old technology, so you can choose which way your path needs to be and design it accordingly.
Okay, great panel. I think we're going to end it on that note. A lot of homework I think people have to do and get that staff up to date, get that governance model going. I want to thank today's guests. Alan Hill is Director of Telecommunications at the General Services Administration. Sanjay Gupta, Chief Technology Officer of the Small Business Administration. Stephen Grunch is the Branch Chief Enterprise Cloud Services at U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. Zain Ahmed, Vice President and General Manager, Civilian Sales for CenturyLink. I'm your moderator, Tom Temin, and you've been listening to Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search CenturyLink.